Stat of the day brought to you by Panini America, the official trading cards of the Dan Patrick Show. Dan Orlovsky, you can catch him on NFL Live every weekday at 4 Eastern. Former NFL UConn quarterback back with us. Good to see you, buddy. I'm going to let you pick. You're going to be the offensive coordinator with these openings. The best opening as an offensive coordinator is where?
Atlanta. Has so much talent, so many weapons, very good offensive line. I'd like to keep my offensive line coach, Dwayne Ledford, who, if you talk to anybody in the NFL, has done a great job down there and is one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. I understand there's a significant question mark and void at the quarterback spot with the, Michael Penix inability to consistently perform and to be on the field. What's going to happen with Cousins? It sounds like he'll be a free agent, but Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, there's just too much talent and a good offensive line.
But being a former quarterback, I would have thought the Raiders or the Giants. Now, what would scare you about the Raiders?
That's the worst roster in football. There's such a lack of talent on the football team. I mean, the only person that you can confidently say you is a trademark foundational piece is Brock Bowers, and he's outstanding. Genty's still a little bit of a question mark. We don't really know how good he is, and it's not all his fault. The offensive line was very bad. I think they'll end up trading Max Crosby just for value, and so number one pick, all that. There's just so many. I think it's 3 years from now before you really get the necessary pieces to have a chance to play consistently good offensive football. I'm with you on the Giants. That would be the one that would be very close to me. Neighbors' health, huge. Scattaboo. I'm a huge Jackson Dart fan. I was coming out. Everyone knows that. So Atlanta is not this head and shoulders above the Giants for me, but I just think because of the pieces there and the division as well.
Best opening right now is where?
Probably the two that I was just talking about, Atlanta and New York, but they're different. And it's almost like a 180. New York, you have a quarterback, but you still need other pieces. The offensive line's not good enough outside of the left tackle. And then you probably need a second or third pass catching option. Theo Johnson had some moments, but you got a quarterback. The problem is it's a general manager who has to win now. He has to win now. And so it's a very short window that immediate success has to happen. Where in Atlanta, I talked about those pieces. You're also, as a head coach, going in the same timeline as that general manager. And you're going to, I think Atlanta would make sense to either keep Kirk or I could see them adding maybe a second round draft pick at quarterback, but you're in lockstep timeline-wise with the general manager.
And I'm wondering about John Harbaugh or Kevin Stefanski, how much say they would have. Liam Cohen goes to Jacksonville and says, I don't want that GM. The Giants got their GM already in place. How difficult is that to sell, let's say John Harbaugh, hey, come in and we already have our GM?
Yeah, I would imagine it's a challenge. The part of that is, do those guys have a previous relationship? Do they get along? Do they think they can work together? Just because we're friends doesn't mean we can work together. What would be the plan? And I don't know if those are questions. I've never been in the situation, Dan, where if John Harbaugh wants the Giants job, but wants to make sure that he protects his back with, okay, if this isn't necessarily going great early on, I don't know even if you address that in interview questions with the Mara family. But if you're the Mara family and Harbaugh, well, what happens if you guys decide to move on from Joe Shane? Then do I get to pick the general manager? Do we have a list of people we're already planning on if that becomes the worst case scenario? And so I do think it presents a challenging situation. Kyle, I remember years ago, went to San Francisco and then brought on John Lynch in his own, kind of decision. So, I don't, sometimes a lot is made out of that. And sometimes I don't know if it's as big a deal as we make it out to be.
Well, then you got the Browns situation. How attractive is that job if with ownership and you got the GM in place?
I don't find it overly attractive. I think Andrew Berry's done a nice job. I do. All of us analysts can't talk out of the both sides of our mouths. We have, for it feels 4 or 5 years now, talked about the Browns and said, man, this is such a good, young, talented roster if they could just figure out the quarterback position. So we can't say that over the course of what feels like 4 or 5 years, but then also not or say, how is Andrew Berry still there? And I do think he hasn't been perfect, but I do think he's built a good football team for the most part. But then you've got the ownership, and they just fired a coach who's a 2-time coach of the year. That assumption on my end, but by all accounts, was forced to have a quarterback signed to a ridiculous contract. When was the last time a coach won in Cleveland? And they just move on from him. And so I understand that there's 2 first-round picks, but I think there's other places that are much more desirable.
But you got Deshaun Watson, you're paying him. He was healthy enough to practice. So why don't you open up the opportunity for him to kind of try to prove himself for this 1 year?
Oh, that ship has sailed. I mean, the last time Deshaun played good football, I think, was 5 years ago, 2021. And I would tell you, Dan, the thing that stood out the last time I think we saw him playing on the field, which I believe was maybe 2023, was he looked like a shell of himself athletically. I mean, Deshaun's dealt with some injuries now. I mean, he's got, I think, at least 2, if not 3 ACL tears. He's got the Achilles. He had the shoulder. I mean, I think just physically his body is just kind of started to break down. I just don't think athletically he's what he was 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Yeah, he stopped running, and you're right. He kind of lost that athleticism or that willingness to take a hit. I brought this up before with Lamar Jackson. He went from 11 rushing attempts to around 5.
Yep.
And is that a concerted effort on his part or the offensive coordinator, collaborative? But running quarterbacks, mobile quarterbacks, do eventually stop trying to run as many times as, they did when they were younger. Is that what happened with Lamar?
Yeah, but collaborative. It's the smart thing to do. It's the right thing to do from a coaching perspective of not asking that player after he's, kind of built up the career that he has and has taken hits to continue to do that 6, 7, 8+ years into your career, specifically in September, October, and November. Now, as you get into December and playoff football, you probably ramp it up. And I think that's what a lot of people expect from like the Philadelphia Eagles and the Buffalo Bills as they get into these playoff runs. And then I think it's certainly part of the player to sit back and go, all right, availability, my health, I got to be at my best when it's needed the most. It's a long season. That one game that's been added, people probably think it's only a small thing. It's a huge deal for these organizations and these quarterbacks. They expect to be playing 19, 20 games, maybe 21. And so I do think it's a self-preservation reality. Lamar was banged up this year to begin with. We were talking about it consistently on NFL Live that he was getting tackled in one-on-one situations more than I had ever seen. And so, yeah, it was one of the storylines for the Ravens this year.
Can Josh Allen limit his? I mean, he seems consistent. He's running 7 times a game.
Yeah, I just think it's situational when Josh has done it. It's Josh used to run 7 times a game, and 5 of them were just to go do it and try to run through the whole defense. It seems a little bit more strategic nowadays for Josh, where, I'll do it on a 3rd down. I'll do it in the red zone. I got the conversion. I'll go out of bounds or I'll slide and not necessarily try to prove how tough I am. And so it seems to be a little bit more of a concerted effort to be situational and strategic.
Talking to Dan Orlovsky of the Mothership, Adam Schefter reporting that the Giants will interview Mike McCarthy. I was just mentioning his name, 10 minutes ago, that he's kind of off the radar, but I'm wondering why he's off the radar. His resume is similar to Sean Payton, Mike Tomlin, and Harbaugh.
Yeah, he's a good coach, obviously. Mike McCarthy's had a lot of success. I think that there's places that make sense. Last year I was like, man, I would entertain him in Chicago to get Caleb to play a little bit more on structure. There's a part of me that feels that way with Jackson Dart, but I also think Jackson Dart probably has to live and should live in a little bit more of a Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, a creative world where that's emphasized. I would also say this. It has to make the Giants take a little bit of a step back and go, wait, why did our offense in Dallas look the way it did for stretches? in 2023 and 24. And I know there was no George Pickens, obviously. And then it looked like the way it did under Brian Schottenheimer in 2025, where it was one of the best offenses in football. That has to be at the forefront of the Giants. And if this conversation is a real thing between them and Mike McCarthy.
Give me the quarterback under the most pressure in the playoffs.
I'm not giving you Josh because Josh is the clear runaway, obvious answer, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to say it's Trevor. Dan, I called Monday Night Football in 2024. Let's call it 14 months ago. On the road, he was playing up in Buffalo. They got destroyed, and he was awful. And I remember being on the call, not even on the call, in the meetings beforehand, being like, something just seems off with him. He just doesn't have the confidence right now. And then you watched it play out in the game and in the booth. I'm like, oh my gosh, is this the beginning of Trevor Lawrence being an afterthought in the NFL? And it was just, you could tell he did not have any belief in himself. And then they hire Liam, and there's a little bit of friction maybe early on in the season. And there's the moment against the Bengals pinning on his chest, and everyone's making a big deal out of it and whatnot. And then right now he's the hottest quarterback in the NFL going into the playoffs. It's the hottest pass game in the NFL going into the playoffs. They've got him thinking less. They've got him reacting more. He thinks he's the best player on the field every time he steps on the field. And so you're watching it play out in real time of like, this is the guy you were at Clemson. This is the guy you were drafted to be the number one overall pick. You're playing this weekend against the guy that people thought you could be like. And so I would say just the way he's played this year, guys go into different groupings, into different areas when they go do what they've done in the regular season in the postseason. I say Trevor Lawrence.
The coach under the most pressure.
Sean McDermott.
Is he coaching for his job?
I hate answering this question, yes. But my job is to be honest, yes. And I think the world of Coach McDermott. I think he's a great football coach. But what we're watching in the NFL right now is these organizations that have high expectations. If those expectations are not met, these people move off from it. And I just watched the Ravens move off from one of the great coaches in the last 2 decades. And if Buffalo falls flat and does not win this weekend, is it outrageous to think that they decide to move on from Sean McDermott? Maybe they hire John Harbaugh. Maybe that's the coach that they choose to go and replace that move. But yeah, I think so, because just the expectations are high.
I mentioned this at the top of the hour that Indiana's a great story. Fernando Mendoza is a great story. But I got to separate great story from are you a great player? And it feels like Fernando Mendoza, who his Heisman numbers were probably middle of the pack if he didn't throw interceptions.
Yeah.
But how should we evaluate him and Dante Moore, since they're the two quarterbacks who are above everybody else? But that I don't know if they're just the best quarterbacks this year. So I don't know how good they are.
Yeah. So I would say with Fernando, I think the starting point is, can you see it and can you throw it? And those boxes are checked, yes. That's a clear declaration that he can see it and he can throw it. Those have to be foundational traits for quarterbacks.
Explain that, though. See it, throw it.
Yeah, so a lot of times with quarterbacks, it's, can you see what the defense is presenting you? He was on with Pat the other day, and he uses the phrase, every play is a puzzle. And I have to figure out what that puzzle is. I often say every play the defense presents to you a question, and you have to know what that answer is. And the question is often, do you have a problem? What's the front? What's the coverage? Where's the blitz? What's the weakness of the coverage? So you have to see kind of all of that moving in a very short period of time. Can you see that? Or are you a guy that can't? Because some guys can and some guys can't. And then, Dan, there's levels to it. What happens if you can see it, but it takes you 0.2 of a second too long? That's an eternity in the NFL. Brock Purdy's one of the greats to do it. I can see exactly what you're doing. Brady was talking about it years ago when he was going into the Super Bowl, I think against the Chiefs. He was like, I knew exactly what they were doing before they knew what they were doing. And so Fernando can see it. And I think that's one of the things that's become clear the more that people have watched him is like, if you allow him to know what you're in, you're dead. He's going to carve you up. So can you see it? And then can you throw it? I hate the phrase, this guy can make all the throws. I don't care. There's thousands of people on planet Earth that can make all the throws. You have to make the right throw at the right time. So that's what I mean by that. This 18-yard in route versus cover 3 is a different throw versus cover 2, is a different throw versus cover 1, is a different throw when I have to move in the pocket, is a different throw when the backside linebacker is 2 yards more into the middle of the field than he is. And so that's deep football talk. So I think he can do that. How great is he when it comes to the plus plays? How great is he when he hasn't necessarily dealt with a ton of adversity at Indiana this year? And then with Dante Moore, Dan, he reminds me of Matt Ryan a little bit. If it's in rhythm, it's lovely. It's lovely. It's pure. It's rhythmic. It's like the consistency of that. It's very smooth. When he has to move, when he has to be off time just a second, I think that person becomes a little bit more realistic and average. Matt had this really sudden athleticism in the pocket that allowed him to play at a consistent level. Dante's got to develop that, but he's very pure.
We were talking about this pre-show. If Arch Manning was in this year's draft, number 1 overall.
Not even close. Not even close. Not even close. He'd be the runaway number 1 pick. Arch Manning is kind of like the throwback 1970 quarterback with modern day training and nutrition. I'm a huge fan of this guy. He's physically remarkably gifted. He's intelligent when it comes to the football understanding of speed and space, all that. I think he's wired the right way. When you watch him on a sideline, he's ultra competitive. I think he's weathered a lot. He's going into the NFL, or when he does, he's going to have weathered so many different storms. And we know that's a huge deal. So many different finger pointings and adversity and hype and falling short and getting punched and getting back up. You got to have that skill. You have to have that trait to be elite outside of the physical things. And so, yeah, he would be number 1, runaway.
Wow.
Runaway.
Okay. I thought he would be a top 10 pick, but when we had this conversation before, I was told that, NFL scouts said, no, he would be the number 1. He would be the number 1 pick.
Runaway, Dan. Runaway.
He didn't say that. He wasn't that confident. He just said he'd be the number 1 pick.
And add in the context of this, the 1-2 pick are Las Vegas and New York. I mean, these are huge markets, obviously massive organizations when it comes to like at least visibility. And so, yeah, number 1, runaway.
And then you'd have Brady as the owner in Vegas. And
the pick would already be made.
Great to talk to you, as always. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Dan Orlovsky of the Mothership. You can see him on NFL Live every weekday afternoon at 4 Eastern. We'll take a break. Your phone calls coming up. Tony Dungy next hour.